only at Unity Church of Dallas. Thank you, Amy and band. You all are such a blessing to each and every one of us. Thank you. Thank you. So it is my honor to introduce our speaker today. And I have known Roger for a long time, and I'm trying not to tell everything I know about him, but it is all with love. Roger Kennedy has been a spiritual seeker and student for 40 years. He began visiting Unity of Dallas in 1986 until 1989, returned 27 years later in 2016. He is versed in A Course of Miracles, in the Urantia book, the Alexander series by Ramon Stevens. He also endeavors to understand the true meanings of the parables and the teachings of Jesus. Now, that's so Roger has invited Aaron Gallegos to open for him with a meditation. So welcome to the stage, Roger and Aaron.
Thank you, Ann. Again, one of the chaplains. I'll invite you again to have a mind of the servant leader. If you may, you can close your eyes and feel your body, feel the edges of your body. Feel your head, your fingertips, your skin, and reminding ourselves that everything is physics. Every single particle of us is vibrating, and there's atoms. And on the edges, we can communicate to the cosmos, to the air, to the energy around us, to the people next to us, to the people on the other side, even to the people across the world. Feel how everything is connected. Feel how God, the universe, is utilizing Roger and his wisdom and his attitude of being a servant leader to inspire us, to lead us on, and to help us understand, to enable us to see the wisdom and through his eyes, see the spirit of seeking higher understanding, higher love, higher consciousness. You remind yourself that you're only one of the flowers in the big garden. You get the perspective that you are such an important part of the whole panoramic view, because you are. And right now, we're focusing on this beautiful jewel of Roger Kennedy. When you feel ready, you can open your eyes. And we offer this, and we seek for more, ask for more. Amen.
I want to thank Aaron for that beautiful meditation. I'd also like to express my appreciation both to Deb and Debbie for giving me this opportunity. I've taught a number of classes, the Seekers with Carolyn and then Explorers, but this is my first time up here, so there's a little bit of that going on. So as the other, one other heads up, what's a little bit different about today is when I'm done speaking, I'm not actually complete, because I'm also a singer and a composer, and I'm going to walk over there before the end of my time and do a song, an original composition of mine that's in keeping with today's theme. So as Ann said, I was here in the Donald Curtis days as a youngin' in my 30s. And then for 27 years, I went to other churches and came back 8 years ago this month, in July of 16. And particularly for the last 4 years, I have really gotten a lot out of studying unity as practical Christianity, but particularly the 5 principles of Ellen Davenport's books in both English and Spanish, because I'm part of the Spanish ministry here too. But where I'd like to walk through the door for this morning is something that I learned over a year and a half ago from Reverend Barbara White. So several times she has given a number of sermons at Greenville, and Louise Ross and I would go and listen to her. And I'm going to say this is over a year ago, and I've heard a lot of phrases, a lot of ways to describe unity. But we were sitting there, and she finished a sermon one morning, and almost as an afterthought or as a reminder, she said, you know what we need to remind ourselves what distinguishes unity and religious science, now CSL, from most all other denominations is, and she said this phrase, we understand ourselves to be divine blessings. Original blessings, not original sinners. And I was sitting next to her, I audibly gasped. I had never heard that. And for the next several weeks, it messed with my head. And it's like, yeah, that's true. That's true. And I'm willing to see that. But my thought was, on the fifth dimension of the Creator and the unconditional love and our higher entities, our higher selves, the angelic order, yeah, I can see. But down here, everything's rough and tumble, everything's polarized. You know, we're getting beat up by daily life. As like, who sees that? And I spent a lot of time contemplating that. And after a while, I realized that one of the Unity's teachings is our higher selves have sent us down here in this lifetime to grow and experience and awaken, as Reverend K. Hunter that I had years ago would say, we are awakening back to our divine selves. And it's like, yeah, that's true. And finally, a couple weeks later, I realized that's what the Course in Miracles is. That's the gift from Jesus. It's the individual curriculum to awaken, reawaken, and discover who we really were, so that on the third dimension, in a heaven on earth, we could understand ourselves to be original blessings. Like on the, with my hearing loss, everything comes at me strangely and I don't know what's going on. So anyway, it's like, okay. And I began to come to terms with that. But what really gave me the inspiration for this topic, and particularly the spiritual speed bumps, were two events that happened just a little over a year ago, 4 weeks apart, and they were profound for me. One of them was, I attend either online or in person 3 other churches, or groups within them. And there was a group that had a spiritual circle one Friday night, and this has been a little over a year ago. And there was a potluck, and there were about 15 men and women and a female facilitator. And we all eat, and I had kind of noticed that she had what I'd call almost a sly smile, and I thought, I wonder what she's up to. So everybody gets done eating and put away, and almost beaming like the Cheshire Cat, she says, I have a question for y'all. What obstacles do you place in the middle of your spiritual path? And everything was just silent. And she said, let me rephrase that. What is it about your nature that slows down your spiritual growth? Well, having thought about this a lot for years, I kind of knew what she meant, and I was ready to answer. But I thought, okay, don't be too eager, let 2 or 3 other people go first. Well, nobody answered. And I mean, it was an uncomfortable silence. It went on like 10 or 15 seconds, and I thought, okay, what the heck, I'm going to go ahead and answer. And I spent a minute and a half or so talking about 2 speed bumps, 2 obstacles, 2 aspects of my nature, and I'm going to come back to those briefly in a few minutes. And I got done, and then another woman in the circle raised her hand, and she started to talk about it, and then she pulled back. And so the facilitator saw that wasn't going anywhere, so she went to her next subject. And I'm sitting there, and I'm thinking, what just happened? What, you know, and I noticed also that she didn't share hers either. She didn't share what aspects of her nature or obstacles she placed. And so it's like, so I thought about that all weekend, and because it was a Friday night. And by Sunday, I had concluded to myself that with each person in the circle, one of 2 things had happened. Either a given individual didn't understand or wasn't clear on what the facilitator was asking, or maybe in some cases they were a little bit embarrassed and not willing to be fully vulnerable and do what I had done. Being a Pisces, I had no problem at all. One of our qualities is we dissect ourselves to death. You know, who do I need to ask forgiveness from? What have I done wrong? How can I have been better? So for me to answer that question had been no issue at all. So anyway, I keep a spiritual Rolodex in my head. I just made a card on that. It's like, okay, that was an interesting experience. About 4 weeks later, to the Friday night, 4 weeks later, I had been given the opportunity to host one of the movie nights for Fusion Fridays. And I was delighted to do so, and I had chosen 1972 classic. Those of you under 50 probably won't even know this movie exists. It was Zeffirelli's masterpiece, Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon. And it is a beautiful, beautiful movie about the lives of young Francis and Claire, and how they got to know each other in a CC, and the story of how they came to found the Franciscan order and the Claretian order. And in the movie, he's known as Francesco. I've seen this movie many times since the mid-'80s. I adore it. So we were having this movie night. There were about 45 of us out here in Fellowship Hall. And according to time, before we watched it, I said, okay, we're going to have about 15, 20 minutes afterwards for a discussion. So I'd like each of you to ask, and I didn't have the Friday night circle anywhere in my mind. That was gone. But I was asking this group, I want you to think about 2 questions. And afterwards, you may, if you feel like it, we'll probably have time for several people to discuss. The 2 questions I want to ask yourself are, as you watch the movie, what are 1 or 2 qualities that you see in either Francesco or Claire or both that you would like to see expanded in yourself? And the second question is, within our church community, how would you go about soliciting support in expanding those qualities in yourself? So we saw the movie and we had the discussion, and unlike the circle, I felt very good. There were 5 or 6 people that talked about, yeah, I really like that quality or that quality, and we didn't have a lot of time, but I felt the night was a success. And I filed that one away. About 10 days later, 2 weeks later, it hit me that those 2 nights, which I hadn't made any connection, had been mirror image of each other. And by that I mean the facilitator had been asking the group, what gets in your way? What makes you smaller? What shrinks you spiritually or holds you back? And I had been asking the group, what do you see where you could be expanded spiritually? And how would you gain support for this? And the dichotomy of that struck me that it, like I said, it had been a mirror image of each other. So I kind of took this all in and just kind of filed it away. This was in April of last year. And I didn't think any more of it until about 5 months later. Seekers had ended, and I didn't think I would be teaching or speaking anymore. And mid-September, I get a text from Deb saying, Ramona and I are both going to be gone. Would you like to teach Explorers on this date in September? Boy, would I. And I was very, very happy. And I called. I have 2 spiritual mothers in this church, Lynn Dowler and Billy Jones. And I called Billy, and I said, boy, I really want to do this. I want to combine the 2 events. See if I can bring in the speed bumps. I had by that time named them speed bumps that get in our way, but also how to expand. But Billy, and I want to talk about my 2 just very briefly, but I'm concerned that we'll have the Friday night. And I'll speak for 10 minutes, and then there'll be half an hour dead time. Would you do this for me, Billy? Would you come up with something for yourself, kind of like priming the pump on the lawnmower to get the gas going? And she said, yeah, I'll do that. So anyway, we had that class, And I went ahead and shared mine first, and I will reveal these very quickly now. My two aspects of my nature, roadblocks, speed bumps, are defensiveness and scarcity. And I've known these for decades, and they came from my growing up. When I was a kid, I was very opinionated. I was a good kid, athletic, I was smart, didn't give my parents trouble, but I was always giving my opinion. My father used to ask me, does everybody have to know everything you think about every subject? Well, by my 20s, I'd outgrown this. But what happened was, whether it was in my church or school or my extended family or my friends, people learned that the way to put me back in my place, back in the container, was to criticize me, whether it was legitimate or not. And I got conditioned, and I built this kind of tortoise shell of defensiveness. And even though, as I got into my 20s and 30s, I had stopped giving my opinion all the time, I had made this shell, a protective shell. And by the way, there is a whole section in the Course in Miracles. Defensiveness is a major issue for a lot of people on the planet. All kinds of different reasons, but there is a whole section that I have studied over the years. So anyway, I had built this shell to where if people were critiquing me or giving me suggestions, I took it as an attack. The other one was scarcity. I grew up in Topeka, Kansas, about 50 miles west of Kansas City. I like to say I grew up in the shadow of Unity Village Tower. But anyway, I was very well parented and grandparented in Topeka, very well raised. My mother was an identical twin. And my aunt and my uncle, my parents, and my grandparents had all suffered in the Depression, particularly my father. He had grown up in a large family in Philadelphia, and they didn't grow food in inner Philadelphia, and they came close to starving. What happened, the message that was put to myself, my siblings, and my cousins was, we are not decision makers. We are not people who decide things. We are people who work hard for what we get. We're darn glad we got it, and we settle. And that filtered through to the extent that when I got a full scholarship to go to SMU in '69, which is what brought me down here, I was in the middle of all this money, and I was completely comfortable because that's not who I was. I was not abundance. I had been darn lucky and appreciative to be on full scholarship. And so I got done sharing this, and then Billy shared an issue that she brought up that I hadn't known about. And I'm standing there, and it's like, okay, what's going to happen? Well, there were about 25 of us, and by my count, by the end of the class, I had marked about 20 people had shared. And one by one, people started sharing. And I was hearing things like, I don't feel worthy of God's love. I'm very anxious about the outside world and what's going to do to my kids and my grandkids. I don't know how to ask for help. I'm too judgmental. I don't know how to forgive. I'm constantly doubting myself. And I'm thinking these are not mine. These are not my issues. I've talked about mine. And I'm standing there in Myrtle with this class listening, and I'm having basically three reactions. First of all, I'm very relieved that everybody's talking and that we're getting a good response. Number two, I'm shocked. And this was really profound for me. I'm shocked that people, some who I know well, some who I know a little bit, some who I don't even really know, are making themselves vulnerable and speaking out loud things that we would have never known about each other if we hadn't had this class and inviting this. And the third thing I'm feeling is I'm standing and it's like, going back to the movie, How Would You Solicit Support? I thought there's possibilities here, but I don't know what to do with it. But I know that somebody who is anxious about the world, I'm not. I could be very supportive to that person. Maybe somebody else could be supportive about, helping with me with my defensiveness. So anyway, I felt very, very good about the class. And so I've done some other explorers, but that one was very profound for me. That was last September. And believing in practical Christianity, as I do, and I learned this from Deb and Lisa in the new members class like 2.5 years ago, that's one of the things I'm most fond of about unity is that we actually put it into practice. We incorporate it into our spiritual lives. And so, and this took several months, but I have come up with a 3-step process, I think, for minimizing, it's not up there, is expanding the qualities we want to see more of and helping to dissolve or minimize the things that are getting in our way. And the way it's come to me is like almost like a bullseye target, 3 concentric circles. And the first one I call the personal work. And what I mean by that, I've never been in addiction, but I understand from years of talking to people that are, and I think it's step 4, is what they call an honest inventory, where you honestly look at the situation, for the purposes that got you into the addiction, and or whatever it is, the issue you're going through. And I like that. Of course, my nature being what it is, like back in the Friday night circle, I know myself pretty well. I think I know pretty well how I'm perceived. I know my strengths, and I know my flaws. And so with each of these 3, I want to give you an example of how this has worked for me. So in terms of the honest inventory or the personal work by myself, the being upfront about who I really am and what's really getting in my way, as the facilitator said, what about my nature was slowing down my spiritual growth. If I hadn't done that inventory to some degree, I wouldn't have been able to be the one that night that spoke about those 2 things, the defensiveness and the scarcity. And I have a couple of minor ones too. I can get into being over-emotional response to things, or I sometimes have self-doubt. But the ones that really slow me down are the defensiveness and the scarcity. The middle circle out of that I call the trusted circle. And I have them outside this church, but I'm going to speak within the community of this church right now. So I suggest that there be, in each person's life, a trusted circle of people who you know that you can trust, who you know have your best interest in heart. And I'm going to go ahead and reveal mine. They are Billy Jones, Lynn Dowler, my boss, Randy Sitzman, and our tech social media gal, Jennifer Markley. I have relationships with all 4 of these that are very honest, and I'm going to give you 2 examples of how they've served me. So I came back about 8 years ago, and about 5 years ago, I was starting to be more involved in different departments. And one thing to know about me, if you know me well, is my middle name is Casual. If I had it my way, I would live in T-shirts, those polyester acrylic running pants, because I'm kind of an athlete, and I'd shave every 3rd or 4th day. Well, Carla was beginning to use me on stage. I was doing solos, I was singing with the choir, I was beginning to teach, and interestingly, Lynn and Billy, my spiritual mothers, both came to me separately. They didn't even do it together. And the message was kind of, son, if you're going to start having a higher presence in this church, you're going to need to upscale the grooming and the dress. Don't wait till you're shaggy back here. Get a haircut, shave more often. And it hurt, but I knew that neither of them were trying to attack me. My defenses weren't coming up. It hurt. I didn't like, but I knew they were right. I knew they were right. And so I think I scrub up pretty good when I need to. The other example of how that trusted circle has helped, Randy and Jennifer. They are far more well-versed and experienced in dealing with groups, with individuals, relationships, and I can go to either of them and ask, did I deal, I'm the monitor for Church of God on Saturdays, but we have a lot of rental events. Did I handle that well? And I know that they will be straight with me. Or how do you think that person perceived what, or do you think I'm handling this in the best way? It's because I have that trusted circle that I know I'm going to get the truth, and I know I'm going to keep growing, and I'm going to work through the speed bumps that I have. And finally, the outer circle I'm calling the community dynamic. And I'm talking about, again, I'm keeping this, I have a life out there too, when I'm referring to the church, because I'm very, I'm involved in about a half dozen different areas of this church. The community dynamic, whether it's a group I'm in or whether it's the community in total. And I want to go, and I have two examples of how incorporating that into my practical spirituality has helped. And one of them is where I had said, when I was listening to these people back in the explorers back in September, it's like, wow, okay, her issue is, I'm just hypothetically, I don't feel worthy of God's love, or I'm too judgmental. It's like, if given a chance, if we sat down, that's not my issue. I can be supported through the defensiveness the way that Billy and Lynn have done. I could do that for somebody else. But here is where it really paid off for me. And he doesn't know this, he's coming, he's sitting in the back. In the September, about 2/3 of the way through that Explorers, Drew Dixon raises his hand and told the class, there's about 25 of us, that he had just finished reading a book, I believe it was a female author, and he wanted us to know that she had said, and we get this right, the opposite of scarcity is not abundance, the opposite of scarcity is sufficiency. And a half dozen of us went, oh, whoa, wait a minute. I mean, it just went down me through like a shot. It's like, wow, if that's true, I have always been sufficient. I've always been provided for. I've always paid my bills. I've always had a place to live. My family got through it. It's like, and it just hit me as true. And so here's my point. If we had not had that community, that group, that class, he would have never said that. I would have never been as changed as I've become in the last 10 months from hearing that. That has really shifted in me. And the irony is, my income has gone up 50% ever since that class without really trying, because my whole attitude about trying to prove abundance, or prove as I'm good as anybody else, and if you just give me more finances, then I'll know as I'm good as everybody else, because that's one of my two big speed bumps. The sufficiency thing, I am much more at ease, much more relaxed about finances and material, but sufficiency is also in terms of my relationships. They're in terms of my sense of myself, my spiritual quotient, if you will. That was huge, and that's an example of how the community dynamic worked, was that he brought that up, and I think from the response there were probably several other people who were having the same issue that were changed because of it. I know I was. I was very grateful to hear that. It would not have been said to any of us had we not had that group and were discussing that topic. So this is just my offering. I'm all about the practical spirituality. And before I walk over to the piano, I have a final thought. I've mentioned this in a couple of Explorers classes, but I thought, do I say this on the main stage? I'm going to. My closest friends in this church and out of it know that I refer to this church, Unity of Dallas, as ground zero. There are two reasons for that. The first one is, in this 4-decade spiritual journey, I've been to a lot of churches, a lot of Christian denominations. I taught college-level ESL for 35 years. I've been to many different houses of worship, faith traditions as I call it. I spent 3 weeks in India about 15 years ago. And I've been to a lot of Unity churches. And this is not a flattering or a compliment. I've said this to my closest friends. I know I belong here because although it's almost impossible on the human level at this point to approach the Christ consciousness, collectively speaking, I believe the consciousness of this church is higher than any place else that I've been. And I know that we have gone through quite a bit in the last year, and probably going to go through some more. But that said, if I use the Course in Miracles and the Urantia, which I know a lot of people are not familiar with that book, but it's a complement to the Course in Miracles. This is the highest consciousness, collectively speaking, that I've been around, and that's where I want to be. The second one is, and I've been saying this ever since I came back 8 years ago, I just know that this church has a destiny to be there as the world continues to unravel, and a lot of people have kind of become bereft spiritually or turned their back on it, and there's more and more wringing hands about the anxiety of the third dimension world, and how am I going to get through this? I have visions that both in Spanish and in English, we're going to be having people coming to this church looking for, help me understand. What do you guys understand that I don't? Why are you so calm? Can you help me? I know that it's coming, and I know that we appear to be down right now, or there are budget concerns or any of that. I just know that this church is being prepared to be a magnet for a lot of people. I'm not probably the only one, but one of those, and because of the higher principles of unity, I believe it's the kind of message that is going to be waiting for a lot of people. And even now, we're watching the Spanish ministry slowly but steadily grow. People are being drawn to it, and that's going to continue. And I just believe that that's going to happen throughout the church. And so before I walk over to the pen, I want to thank you for listening. Okay, I have, over these 40 years, written probably 24 original songs and lyrics, music and lyrics, mostly spiritual. And the one I'm about to do is the most recent one. I did it a couple years ago. And I called God Lives Inside of Me. And it not only reflects the second of the 5 unity principles, God lives inside of each of us, which also happens to be the source of our oneness with each other, but also Luke 17:21, where the Pharisees and Sadducees were constantly harassing him, and they was like, where is this kingdom that we may worship it too? And he said, you won't find it here or there. He said, the kingdom of God is within. And so I wrote a song about this, and I'd like to finish my presentation by playing it for you. 2 things about the lyrics. In the chorus that you'll hear several times, I wrote, God lives inside of me no matter where I've been. No matter where I've been. I put that in there deliberately because the vast majority of humanity doesn't believe, can't conceive that it would be possible that the divine, that the Creator lives within him or her. You don't know what I've done. You don't know what I've said. You don't know the awful things I've been. It's like, but it doesn't matter to the Creator. That is a fact. It's a fact from the Bible, and it's a fact from the second unity principle. The divine God resides within each of us. The second thing is on the 3rd verse, you're going to see at the bottom an odd word called stucher, S-T-U-C-H-E-R, and it won't make much sense except that it is a word that Reverend K. Hunter taught me 40 years ago. It's a hybrid of student and teacher. She was always mindful of not seeming to be superior to us, and she'd say, kiddos, I'm just older than you. We're all students and teachers to each other. And so, and at the very end of the song, after I've done the last chorus, I'm going to clue you guys in, and we'll sing the chorus all together one last time. Thank you. Inside of me, no matter where I've been, as Jesus taught us to see, heaven's kingdom is within each of us, you and me, all of us. The world around me unraveling leaves me feeling confused traveling, hanging out there on my own. In moments of quiet desperation, I start focusing on my regrets, and this sense of separation makes it easy for me to forget that God lives inside of me, no matter where I've been. As Jesus taught us to see, heaven's kingdom is within each of us, you and me, all of us, sisters and brothers around me, each one longing for someone to care. I'm so grateful the others have found me, each of us having something to share. Living this earth life together, each one plays a significant part. There's no storm that we all cannot weather when we know that we're joined at the heart, where God lives inside of me, no matter where I've been. As Jesus taught us to see, heaven's kingdom is within each of us, you and me, all of us. We're all connected in spirit, each one led by the unseen. There's a voice inside, we can hear it. I'm not always sure what that means. Community of the future, we are serving as God's hands and feet, and with each of us as a steward, the divine within is complete. As God lives inside of me, no matter where I've been, as Jesus taught us to see, heaven's kingdom is within each of us, you and me, all of us. Everyone together. God lives inside of me, no matter where I've been, as Jesus taught us to see, heaven's kingdom is within each of us, you and me.